it's a vehicle for making money. And I think it's a very efficient vehicle for making money. It's probably one of the easiest just because of the fragmented nature, the tax treatment, pretty much the leverage you can get, the risk reward of the deals. I think it's probably, I would argue it's probably the best way in the country to actually make money, just given the way the US is set up. So what I'm usually looking for is I want markets where I can actually not renovate, and that we're below the unrenovated market rent. That requires zero work. All you're doing is changing a number on a lease, and you're 100% going to get there because you're still the lowest number in the market, right? You're still kind of the lowest end rent.
I wanted to start off with asking about heroes. There's a Warren Buffett quote where he talks about, tell me who your heroes are and I'll tell you who you're going to turn out to be. So I wanted to just jump right into like talking about some of the heroes that you've had just growing up, maybe in college, post-college stuff, people that have influenced and inspired you along the way, whether real estate related or not.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I mean, I definitely had a ton of different ones. And I think your kind of conception of what you want to do in life changes a lot as you get older. So I'd say my first hero is definitely my dad, just because incredible guy, like incredible work ethic, just so personable and really just so good at kind of getting what he wants, you know, which I think at the end of the day is what you want to do in life, you know, and we would have, I remember just one example, right? We were really young outside of like a Frozen 4. I forgot where we were, where the Frozen 4 is being held, but we're just walking down the street and we're just like, oh, is that the Frozen 4? Like, let's see if we can get in. So we're like trying to like haggle for tickets. There's like none anywhere. My dad just goes up to this random guy who's like, looks like he knows what he's doing, whatever. He talks to him for like 30 seconds. The guy just hands him 4 tickets for free. And we were just like, look, what's going on here? And he just never told us what he said to the guy. But we ended up getting all the tickets for free and went in for free. And that's just kind of an example. Like he always was able to do stuff like that, where it was very much like kind of just showed his background, because he came from kind of like a not great background where he had to kind of have those street smarts and then ended up working on Wall Street. So ended up having kind of both those combinations, which most people don't have, obviously, especially now. I think it's insane how bad people's social skills are now. But stuff like that really, I think, shaped me, kind of understanding what you want to do, how to act, and all that. And then I think as I got older, I kind of morphed, because initially I really just wanted to work on Wall Street, right? Basically in a job. And during my first internship, I ended up meeting the guy who's now my mentor, who basically he was really good friends with the CEO of my firm. And he worked in the same office, and we ended up talking a ton because we'd just be there late. He was working late. I was always working late. It'd just be us in the office. We'd be talking a ton. And the more I talked, the more I was like, why would I work a job when I could just do what he's doing? He's making 10, 20 times more than everyone who's working a job. He's doing the same work, right? It's not different. He's doing the same work. And yeah, he's a little smarter, but he's not that much smarter, right? He's not 20 times smarter. So it really started evolving, and I was just like, why would I do this, right? There's an easier path. And I think just being able to see that other people have done that path really, really helps. And obviously a lot of that is putting yourself in a position to see it and all that. But once you're able to see it, it just becomes so obvious. You're like, why would I do this when I could just be making so much more and owning my own time and having more fun, honestly?
You had a interview that I listened to. I forget who it was with, but you had a comment about 401ks, and you had some interesting thoughts on that, which I really enjoyed hearing. Can you talk a little bit about that? Some of your thoughts on 401ks and how it's not a bet on yourself?
I think it's inherently a bet against yourself. But I think the biggest thing with 401ks, right, is, and you'll hear this from so many people, look, I want to be worth $100 million or $20 million, right? How can you possibly rationalize caring about a 401k then? Right? What is your 401k going to be worth? $1 million, $2 million? Right? So basically you're going to spend all your time worrying about 1% of your eventual net worth. It just makes zero sense. And I think a lot of people they don't get that those are two diametrically opposed ideas. And they just go on with life like, oh, like I just keep contributing to the 401k. It's like, you're not going to get anywhere by doing that. Right? And it's fine. If you want to just save some money, have that money for 65, whatever. Right? Like that's fine. But just be honest with yourself. You're not trying to be worth $100 million, because if you were, you'd be doing it very differently. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is that I think it kind of engineers this mindset where you're dishonest with yourself. And I think a lot of people are like that. And I'll tweet about this a lot of the time too. Say like, look, if you're not willing to do X, Y, and Z, you don't really want it. And someone will be like, oh no, but I still want it. It's like, they don't, because you'd be doing it otherwise, right? And it's pretty simple. And I think that's one of my main issues with the 401k, is that, look, if you want to be as rich as you say you want to be, which is great, cool, I want to be that rich too, the 401k is not going to matter. And you have to be honest about that.
Yeah. So in your own life, I mean, and you're coming out of college, and I do want to get into that a little bit. Some of your early moves, career moves coming out of college. Did you take your own advice? Did you not contribute to a 401k specifically so you could save up capital to start getting involved in real estate deals?
I've never put a dollar into this day. I don't even have one. But I didn't even realize what I was doing at the time, because I think there's a different mindset, right? When you're in the mindset of being an entrepreneur, almost everything is better off being reinvested, either one, in yourself, or two, in a business when you're starting out. And I think a lot of people don't get that either. With their first dollars, they always invest in the market. There's an opportunity cost there, right? Like the first 50K you ever save, that you have to scratch and claw for that, right? That's not easy. And if you're just going to put that in the market where you can't use it to grow yourself or a business, there's a huge cost associated with that. Most people think, oh, I'm getting 8% a year. It's like, no, you just missed out on the opportunity to start a business that can make you $10 million a year. It's insane. And especially if you think about it in the beginning, right? Whatever, 8% off 50K, you make $4,000 that year, right? Like, what have you been doing? And obviously people just start yapping about like compound interest, blah, blah, blah. Sure. But that year you made $4,000, right? And your opportunity cost in that 50K, if you're any bit confident in yourself or a business, will be so much higher than that. So I think I didn't really have that articulated at that point, but I knew I never wanted to put it somewhere where I couldn't control it, because I knew I'd make more money doing it myself.
Right. Charlie Munger's got that quote about the first 100,000 is a and I told you I had Dickie Bush on the podcast last week, and he said the same thing. His first advice for anybody is save $100,000. Don't even screw around with like trying to figure out how to invest in 401ks and this, that, and the other. Save up a nest egg and invest in yourself.
And a crazy thing too is, so the first 30 grand I ever made, I put it into a real estate deal. It was a calculated bet. It was basically, it's hard to explain, but basically there was a 10% chance of making $1 million off it, and a 90% chance I'd lose all the money. The total was 50. I was 30,000 of it, but overall the expected value was positive, right? So that's why I went through it. And it was, the reason it was able to do was just because it was all public information based on cannabis integration into a state. So you could actually do the math on it. And I don't think many people did the math on it. But anyway, ended up losing all the money, right? And that was honestly probably the most painful thing that's ever happened to me, because it took me like just a year straight of just scrabbling, calling, whatever you want to call it, to save up that 30 grand. And then it just went straight out the door. And I was like, wow, this sucks. Like, this is horrible, right? And I think that really taught me a lot just about what I wanted to do with my money, how I wanted to invest it, risk profiles, everything like that. And I've been pretty public about the fact that I think losing money early on is the best thing that can happen to you. I think I can probably argue for myself that I've probably learned that lesson too many times, but it's an important lesson to learn. And once you do, you understand how you should be allocating your money, right? And at the end of the day, once you get to a certain level of wealth, income, all that, it's very hard for the next marginal dollar of income to matter that much, just because of the way it's taxed. So it all becomes how you manage your wealth, how you push it forward. And if you don't learn those lessons early on, you're going to lose all your money on the back end. So you'd way rather lose 30 grand than when you have a $10 million portfolio and you learn that lesson for the first time. I think all those things are actually really important. And that's one of the huge things about not putting your money in the S&P 500 early on, or 401k early on, because you don't learn anything by doing that. And everyone's always like, oh, like you kind of see the market go up and down. No, you don't. You're going to leave your money in there regardless. So you've learned nothing by doing that. Meanwhile, I've lost 30 grand, but now I know exactly what to do next time. So at the end of the day, that money's nothing, right? 30 grand is nothing. And once again, you go back to that mindset, right? You want to be worth $100 million. Why do you care about 30 grand? Right? What is that going to do for you? You need to learn the lesson to multiply that, or to be able to create larger amounts.
I love these points. It's so good. So last week, 2 different people recommended Die with Zero. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, Bill Perkins, but the guy, he worked on Wall Street. He was a trader. And early in his career, he was doing exactly what you were talking about, like saving in a 401k, scratching and clawing, just trying to, and he was making nothing. He was like working on the floor of an exchange as a runner or something like that. So he's just like scrounging and trying to cut costs and saving a couple $1,000 here and there. And he had a mentor, and he said exactly what you said. Like, what are you doing? Like, stop doing this. Like, you're potentially likely going to make a lot more money. Like, what you're doing right now has no bearing on where you're going to be 20, 30, 40 years down the road. Yeah, it just is. Those are some really good points. I love your take on that. It's fun to hear.
The thing about money early on is it's just a tool. It's a tool to learn, right? And once you have that experience, if you're any bit good at investing in yourself or about learning, eventually you're going to have a skill set that can make you $1 million a year. You just will. Whether you want to act on that skill set and actually like go forward with starting that business, or spending the whatever 68 hours a week to do it is a different story. But you can easily get there. Everyone can get there. But you have to be in the trenches learning those lessons. And I think a lot of people never end up exercising that muscle, right? They basically work a W-2 job and I'm nothing against that, but you don't make any decisions of consequence when there's people above you, right? There's always someone telling you, hey, do this, hey, do that. You're never actually exercising that muscle of, oh, I made a mistake. This cost me. Let me recalibrate. Because that never happens because someone else is already correcting your mistakes beforehand. At the same time, they don't learn anything from the investing side because they just put it into a 401k or their retirement account, whatever all those things are. To me, I consider them all the same thing. And I think it's all fine if you're honest with yourself and you say, look, I want to have a comfortable life and I want to retire with a few $1 million at 65. Sure. But if you want to actually make a ton of money, the only way to do that is 1, starting a business, or 2, being a really good investor. Just mathematically, that's the only way to do it. So you have to learn early on that your mind is the most important thing there, right? It's not the capital, it's your mind, because if you're smart, you can multiply money really quickly. And if you're smart, you can start a business. So it's really all about that. And the 30 grand you lose initially, the 100 grand you lose initially, all that, it's a drop in the bucket at the end of the day.
It's education.
It is. It's education, right? And honestly, I would way rather, I know we were talking about college before we started recording, but if you told me I could spend $250K on my own education versus $250K on college, I don't even think it's close, right? I think the only thing you learn in college is, the only thing it's helpful for is 1, the network, which I think is actually worth it. And 2, just really making lifelong friends and memories. But the rest of it, like if you told me what would I pay for the actual college education I received, it's $0. And you could tell no one values it either because all these classes are free. Like Harvard has that school online for free. No one takes it because it's worthless.
It's funny. Sorry to keep mentioning Dickie Bush, but he said the same thing. He went to Princeton, right? And he was a professional gamer, like Call of Duty, and won tournaments and, made money as a kid. And he's like, I learned more playing 18 hours of video games than I ever did at my Ivy League education in terms of how to run a business, how to talk to people, how to build relationships, all these things. He's like, video games taught me more, which I've got kids that play video games 12 or 14, 15, they could play that long. And it was actually a good reframing for me because I kind of viewed it as a total waste of time.
I mean, I would almost go as far as to say I had to unlearn all the bad habits I learned in college. Like, I think it was actually highly detrimental from a professional standpoint. Obviously, look, I had a great time. I made lifelong friends, whatever, right? Let's ignore that part. From a professional development perspective, it probably took me 2 or 3 years to unlearn all the bad habits I learned in college, just because you don't have to do anything. There's no consequences. Nothing's real. Like, you go in there, you get like a C-, nothing matters, right? You just talk to the teacher, you whine about it for a bit, it goes up to like a B+. Who cares, right? You go on to the next thing. And it's just like stuff like that. As long as you knew people, stuff kind of came in the door and you never really had to do that much. And there's really almost like, depending on where you went to school, it's a contained environment. You can't really make any mistakes, right? You make a mistake, it's like a pillow fight. It goes up the ladder, nothing happens, and it comes back down. So I think that's just highly detrimental. I would honestly rank it. College, I think, was detrimental to professional experience. I think my job, I probably learned 100x what I learned in college, maybe the first month. It's just insane. And then starting your business, I would say your first month of starting a business is more valuable than the entire W-2 experience. That's as far as I would go.
There's somebody listening to this that is in college and, maybe you're just looking back on your own experience and giving your younger self advice. Would you have done it totally differently? Would you have dropped out of college and just started something on your own or?
So it's a good question. I mean, personally, I wouldn't have, just because I loved college so much. Like I just enjoyed those 4 years so much. I wouldn't have given up for anything. And at that point, I didn't really care about money or anything, right? It was just like, you're there to have fun. But I think I'd have a different answer if I wasn't able to leave so quickly. But I just was, right? I basically left to join the real estate private equity firm. I was there for a few years. And I've always said this, I think real estate's an incredibly simple business. I don't think it takes that long to learn at all. I think when people say that, they're just completely lying to your face. And I have the actual results to back that up on the deals I've done personally. Basically, I was able to leave really quickly. So it wasn't like I had to spend a lot of time there. It wasn't like it was like this 20-year slog that a lot of people talk about. So I wouldn't really change much. I think I played it pretty much perfectly. At the same time, I had like a ton of failures in there, even in college. Like I tried to start an e-commerce business, completely failed. I mean, me and one of my good friends started this it was like a women's health. I don't even know what the store was, just a total joke. So we were just like, all right, why don't we start running Facebook ads? And we had no idea what we were doing. So we're like, all right, we have $1,000. Like that'll probably go pretty far. I think we tapped out the budget within like 2 days and we're just like, all right, we're broke. I guess it's over. And we just had no money left. So we had a few of those type of experiences too, which I think really helped later on, because now I look at a ton of different businesses, and just understanding kind of the private equity side of it, and not just the real estate side, really helps you understand the risk reward of the real estate deals you're doing and whether it makes sense or not, which I think a lot of people don't have that on the real estate side because they've only ever done real estate. But I've had that experience across a few different businesses now, especially on the online side.
Well, it seems like you're a little bit of a contrarian too. Like, your dad was on Wall Street. You went to an Ivy League school, studied econ, whatever. It seems like you would have gone straight to Wall Street yourself, but you didn't take that path. So I wanted to hear a little bit about that, like going a little against the grain, because you definitely, like, it comes across in your writing that you've got this contrarian bent, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I've kind of always been like that, very opinionated. Like, always the one asking questions. Like, even in like a CCD class, I'd be the one like, did this story really happen? And everyone's like, all right, just like shut this kid up in the back, But no, I would say what happened really was when everyone started doing their official recruiting, which was, I forgot, it was probably sophomore year. It was like during the summer, I was enjoying myself. I was like, I'm not getting in a suit and talking to these people and like pretending I love Goldman Sachs. I'm pretending this guy isn't like a total weirdo, right? So I don't want to do that for my entire summer. So I was just like, nah, I'm just not going to do it. So I just spent the entire summer having fun. Everyone else was like stressing out over like the case studies or whatever those things are. And I basically did nothing. Then when I got back to school, I just took this internship at basically a local startup. And the guy was really accomplished, actually a good guy to this day. I mean, and still invests in my deals, and a
real estate guy, a startup in a real estate.
No, it was actually a startup. It was basically like an entry-level job platform that connected students and employers. But he had started some other businesses beforehand. He was very, very wealthy already. And this is kind of his like second or third business. But he knew a lot, and he was really helpful. And he's still, like I said, he invests in my deals to this day. So we still kind of keep in touch. But basically I was there doing that part-time, and I became pretty good friends with him. We would just kind of like drink on Friday nights. And he was just like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. I want to do private equity. He's like, all right, one of my best friends from business school runs a real estate private equity firm. You want to interview? It's like, sure. So I get to the interview, literally didn't know anything. I got asked one question about real estate. I think it was about like what a cap rate is, like completely bungled it. And then ended up just kind of making friends with the interviewer, because I just pointed out like he had like a picture of him fishing on his desk. And we just talked about fishing for like 45 minutes. And he was just like, look, like you don't really know much, but like you seem cool. Like we'll give you the job. And I ended up getting that internship. Then I grinded at that internship. That was probably the hardest I've worked in my life, I would say. Basically 16, 18-hour days. I wouldn't get up from my desk. I obviously wanted a return offer, So I didn't go out at all, just kind of grinded for 3 months straight and then got the return offer. So that's kind of how I got in. It was a very atypical path. I never did recruiting. I never had to deal with like the whole, I don't even know what to call it, like interviewing slog.
So at what stage did like the light bulb for real estate come on? It didn't sound like you had any real estate background in college or took any real estate courses or anything like that. When did the light bulb hit that it was like, this is what I want to do?
It didn't really, like, it wasn't one of those, and to this day, I'm not that passionate about real estate. Like if you told me, I was actually asking this question, I was at dinner with a few other really accomplished real estate guys, and everyone asked, they're like, look, if someone gave you $1 billion, would you keep doing real estate? I was like, I wouldn't touch it ever again in my life. Right. And a few of them were diehard guys. They're like, look, we would be there the next morning. I was like, you guys are out of your minds. So I've never been huge on it. It's a vehicle for making money. And I think it's a very efficient vehicle for making money. It's probably one of the easiest just because of the fragmented nature, the tax treatment, pretty much the leverage you can get, the risk reward of the deals. I think I would argue it's probably the best way in the country to actually make money, just given the way the US is set up. So I think that's really the main reason I'm in it. But it wasn't like a light bulb came off and I was like, I need to be in real estate. It was just, look, I want to be in private equity. This is probably the easiest backdoor in without having to do what everyone else did. Because at that point, all my friends who had better grades than me, were more accomplished than me, they had to do 2 years of banking to get in. And I basically skipped that entire thing. So I never went through the banking gauntlet. I just skipped straight through and kind of ended up in a really good spot, which I think was part luck, part skill. But that was kind of the main appeal for me, is like, I was like, look, I can shorten my career right now, right? I'll be done and be at the associate level when these people are pretty much kind of coming back in to do their first stint in PE.
So when you worked a couple years at doing PE, at what stage did you, and you mentioned the $30,000 that you lost, but when did you do your first real estate deal? That was while you were working, right?
My first deal that I actually did it was probably like the first year. I would have to see if it was the first year or just after the first year I started working there. I would need to check the timeline, but basically it was a $200K triplex. I, once again, had no money at the time, right? I basically scrapped together $2,500.
And you had lost the 30 grand already, right?
I had lost that 30 grand already. Yes, I'd lost that already. Or did I? I need to double check. But regardless, I had no money, whether I'd lost it or just didn't have it at the time. I had no money. And basically had $2,500. So I knew I had to raise it all. And look, I think a lot of people think it's easy to do in the beginning. Even if you come from, I would say my background's a little bit better than most, but it's really not. Like at the beginning, you're just begging people for money. That's all it is. And you're not going off the deal. You're going off your reputation as a person for the last 20 years of your life. And I think that's one of the biggest things people don't get is they're always like, oh, like, how can I pitch this person? I'm like, I don't know. It's like, it's your friend. Like, why do you not know how to pitch them? Right? Like, why do they not want to give you money anyway? They've known you your entire life. So I've always been I think that's one of the biggest red flags is when I get that question. Someone's like, oh, no one will give me money. Like, that is a really bad sign. Like, that means no one in your life trusts you. And it doesn't need to be a lot of money, right? Like, you just need to piece it together, right? We ended up having, I don't even know how many investors in that deal. I had to bring in my business partner because I couldn't raise the whole 200K by myself. So it took a while. Like, we were like begging and pleading with people, but there's also people who wanted to give us money because they trusted us, because they known us their entire lives, or I'd known them through college or whatever. So yeah, I think people kind of make that part a lot harder than it needs to be, because all that groundwork should be done by virtue of who you are as a person, right? If you're a trustworthy person, you've been trustworthy your entire life. Like, I have friends who easily right now, they've never done an investing role ever. And if they said, hey, can you shoot me 50 grand for this deal I'm doing? I'd say yes immediately, you know? So I've always found that a huge red flag when people are like, oh, I can't find anyone. So that's actually on you. That's not on anyone else.
Yeah, it's an issue, right?
It's a huge issue. I mean, it really is. It's like no one trusts you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You had a good tweet on having a W-2 and going out on your own and just some strong beginner moves that I wanted to talk about. Can you share a little bit about your thoughts on that and just how you handled it? Like when you ultimately went out on your own, talk about that process.
I think it's a funny process because I think actually if I had run the numbers on what would happen, I never would have left. And I think a lot of people kind of think the same way. You almost need to have that sense of naivete where, oh, like, look, I can do it. Like, we'll kind of make it work, blah, blah, blah. But if you actually go through it, it's hard to do early on. So I think you learn so much across the board. I think one of the biggest things you learn is just how much time you waste in a W-2 job. Like, almost everything's wasted. And like, if you actually wrote down, even as a salesperson at a W-2, which is probably the highest level of generating revenue for the company, how much time they spend on actual sales versus BS, it's insane, right? When you switch from that to I can spend 100% of my time every day to making money, you realize making money is not that difficult. It's really not. It just depends. What does become kind of an issue is your time is so directly correlated to making money in the beginning that you feel really guilty when you're not working, because you're like, look, I just missed out on whatever it is, 100 grand on this deal or 5 grand on that. It's just all these things sort of add up and you kind of feel those pangs of guilt by not working. But overall, that's one of the biggest things you learn is it's not that hard, right? The fundamentals are actually really simple. You're basically, if you're selling a service, right, is basically, look, you have an offer, you just need leads, right? Then you just need fulfillment. That's the business, right? And it's the same thing even on the real estate side. Like, it's not that hard. You're piecing together a deal, right? You need a deal, you need equity, you need debt. There it is, right? Like, a lot of this stuff is not difficult. And I think a lot of people really overcomplicate the process, but that's one of the biggest things I learned almost immediately. Because I would say I was able to replace my income. Even when I was at my job, I was making a ton of money just on the online side, on the deals I was selling out of. And I was just like, why am I staying at this job? Right? Like, it's a total waste of time. I probably could make, if I left today and replaced all this time I spent at the morning brew meeting, whatever it was, with making money, I'd be in a 10 times better spot in a year. And I was.
I had the same experience at my first job out of college. I literally could have done the work in 2 or 3 hours a day, right? Realistically. To your point, it just frees up, if you leave, like, it just frees up this huge amount of time to just focus on whatever, entrepreneurship, real estate, a bunch of other things. You've got some ideas. We were talking about Wall Street Playboys earlier, and I was a big fan of those guys in the blog. Talk to me a little bit about them. What was it about them, that some of their ideas and thoughts and their writing that you enjoyed?
I think I enjoy everything. I think they really don't get the credit they deserve. And speaking to a lot of kind of youngerish entrepreneurs, I know a lot of them just, when you actually start talking to them, like, yeah, I actually followed them too. You know, there's a lot of that kind of going on. So I think they kind of nailed everything on the head. The biggest thing I think is really just their emphasis on basically starting a side business, scaling it up, and leaving your job, and the way they structure that in a way that actually the risk reward is better than anything you could ever do. right? Because you basically build it up while you're at your job, which is what I ended up doing kind of on both ends. I had the online side with my Twitter account, and I had the real estate side that I did at the same time. And that's, by the way, that's another thing that I can't take seriously, is when people are like, oh, I can't do anything. Like, I'm working 50 hours a week in my job. It's like, look, like, you can, right? You just don't want to, and that's fine, right? But don't pretend that you want to do it, because when I was doing it, I was probably working 60 hours a week in my private equity job. I was buying deals that were doing really well, and then I was running the online side too. And look, I'm not going to say it was easy, but it was doable, right? And everyone always acts like it's this impossible thing just because their priorities are out of whack. It's like, if you want to go to every single social event, yeah, it's impossible. You're right. If you want to actually be done by 30 or early 30s, you're going to have to give some stuff up, right? It's not going to be fun. And I think a lot of people have this idea that they can kind of do both paths, and you can.
What if in 2024, you got a little bit better every day? When you're learning a new language with Babbel, that's exactly what you're doing. And if Babbel can help you start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks, imagine what you could do in a full year. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are designed by over 150 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. Thanks to Babbel, I can start having conversations and order my food in Spanish at local restaurants when the situation allows. It's no wonder they've sold over 10 million subscriptions, and that studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove that Babbel is better. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/WSB. Get 55% off at babbel.com/WSB. That's spelled BABBEL.com/WSB. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Well, they've got a book, I think it was called Efficiency, which was a really good one. I forget the other one too, that was also very good, that I think anybody should order, get, read, and implement.
They had that one. I think they had Triangle Investing too.
That's it. Yeah, Triangle Investing. That's it.
I honestly thought their blog, which is now defunct, I know we were talking about that earlier, was better than all that stuff. Just a lot of it, their framework, how they approach things. On the business side, kind of what businesses to focus on. I think that helps a lot early on, because a lot of that does save I know I talk about the trial and error period, but you also want to be smart about trial and error, right? You don't want to be doing it a billion times. And it's easier to be kind of focused when you have those suggestions off the bat. So I think a lot of that helped too with what to get into. I think one of the underrated things that they are extremely good at, actually, and probably the best I've seen at, is spotting long-term trends. And I think that's actually how they've made the majority of their money, is just being at the right place at the right time, which is really just kind of like a macro investing thesis, but they take it to a micro level on what they choose to spend their time on. And I think that's kind of very impressive for what they've been able to accomplish there.
So let's go into that a little further. Like, what are some of the macro trends that you're seeing that you are interested in, intrigued by, want to focus on?
So like, I would say in general, from a very wide angle, that would be the most helpful for most people, is I think having a W-2 job is just going to get more and more squeezed as we go forward. Not even like a sales pitchy, like you need to get into real estate scenario, in that, look, the labor pool is getting more and more global every single day. I have a virtual assistant. She's like a law degree in Europe. I pay her like $2,000 a month. She's better than US employees, because I have US employees too. It's coming, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They think they're very good at what they do. They're not. Almost every employee is replaceable. And I think people are in for a really, really rude awakening with that. So what I always try and push people into from just a very wide macro perspective is like, look, you need to be developing a skill you can either use to run your own business or to invest. That's it, right? Anything that's W-2 is eventually going to get squeezed. I think even the high-end jobs in the tech sector, a lot of those are going to get absolutely hammered as time goes on. I think one of the only ones that's safe is a strong sales skill set, right? If you can make other people money, you'll always have a job. But everything else, I think, is in really, really tough shape. And I think that's only going to exacerbate going forward unless the US kind of enacts some legislation to stop it. But at this point, I don't know why you would hire an American employee when you could find someone way more qualified across the country for literally 1/10 the cost. So I think that is probably the biggest macro trend that I see. And the other thing that's actually a really big positive of that is, as the world gets more and more financialized, and as there's a bigger buyer pool for assets, like, the entire move is not to be basically an employee or not to be mostly buying the assets unless you're really good at flipping it, but just start the business and sell it to them. Or you have all these businesses now that would be unsellable 15 years ago that are now really, really sellable. And if you can get a business to a decent multiple, decent EBITDA, you sell it for a decent multiple. And it's not that hard, right? I think getting a service business, for example, to $300K in EBITDA is doable for almost everyone in the country over a 5-year time span, right? And you could argue what that would be sold for, and it depends on the business, but you assume it's sold for around $1 million, right? And that's a better outcome than almost anyone would get anywhere else. Not to mention, if you're actually able to do it right, you're got the EBIT up to a few million, you're probably selling for a way wider multiple. And I think a lot of those things wouldn't have been possible a long time ago. And I think that's always odd when people complain about the current business multiples, like, oh, I can't buy anything. It's like, okay, then just obviously everyone's overpaying for stuff. Create some crap, sell it to them, and call it a day. Right? Like, why are you complaining? It's a perfect opportunity. There are people who are willing to overpay. Create something that they'll overpay for.
What about real estate specifically? I know you're kind of agnostic in what you invest in, but I wanted to hear about, are there any trends that you see unfolding that whether it's office or distressed office that might pique your interest later on down the road?
I think in general, the way to make money, I think there's going to be two ways to make money in real estate going forward. Ignoring the asset class angle, which I think is a little bit more difficult to parse through. But I think you're in kind of smaller fragmented markets and seeing one-off opportunities that you can find a few of those a year. And I think that's always going to be the case. There's always going to be inefficiencies. People are always going to need to sell for one reason or another. And that's always going to be there. So that's basically what I do. I don't want to have a ton of AUM. I don't like scaling. I don't like managing a ton of employees. I just want to do really good deals, put a lot of my own money in, and just be in and out pretty quickly. Like I have no wish to have this huge organization that I have to deal with every second. The other angle is you go the AUM route, which this is actually probably the better risk reward in all fairness, but you just raise a ton of capital. You basically market buy deals that are okay. You use moderate leverage, and you just make money off asset management fees. And look, that's what every big private equity firm is doing now. They all make a ton of money. Personally, I think it's really boring, but it's probably the best risk reward you can get out of any business in the world, honestly. It's if you say you lever a multifamily building 50%, like with fixed rate debt, that thing's not going under unless you're a moron. So basically all you need to do is just keep that thing kicking. You just say, hey, look, our fund's going to be an evergreen fund, right? And we're just going to keep it in there forever. And you just have asset management fees for the rest of your life. And I think that is, on the high end, that's kind of what institutions are all doing now, because it's very hard to find an edge in the institutional space with all the sophisticated actors. But on the other side, you also have those kind of fragmented markets on the low end. So I'll call it the sub $20 million space, which I think will always be there. And I think those are really the two ways I would say to make money. I think there's this kind of purgatory space where you raise like under 100 mil. You can't really pay your employees well. Your AM fees aren't that good. The opportunities are kind of difficult because you're trying to buy deals in the $50 million plus range. I think that's like kind of like a dead space. And if you're in there, you really want to scale up into the make money on asset management fee space before anything else. That's kind of how I look at it from a macro sense. And I do think there's going to be a ton of opportunities, and I'm seeing them right now too, because I deal with people all the time, whether clients, friends who are kind of seeing these opportunities. And I've seen a few in the past 2 months that were actually very good as well. So I do think the opportunities will be there.
So let's go into your thesis a little more. You focus on tertiary markets. It sounds like you really learn the market that you really better than anyone in the area and wait for a deal to come up that's mispriced. Is that somewhat accurate to say?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, it's a very simple method. And really the reason why it works is because when you're in these type of markets, it doesn't make sense for institutions to be there because they can't get scale, right? Those AUM fees that they really like, those asset management fees, they don't come in, right? Because there's only $200 million worth of assets to buy in total. And obviously they're not going to buy all of them. So that's basically the idea, is that you're in these markets that are fragmented. You know it better than anyone else. You basically pick the markets. The way I pick markets, I think, is incredibly unique, because I think most people look at it from a statistics perspective, right? They basically say, what's the population growth? What's the economic engine in the area? What's the unemployment rate? What's the crime rate? And look, like, I'm not going to say those things aren't important, but that's not how you make money in real estate, right? Mathematically, how you make money in real estate is getting your stabilized yield above the market cap rate. The stabilized yield doesn't care what the crime rate is. Neither does the market cap rate. So I always find it funny how people like have this like third derivative and they're like, oh, like the crime rate's doing this. That's sure. But if I stabilize at a 20, do I care what the crime rate is? And the answer is obviously not. And I think a lot of people they don't realize that the metrics they're using are one step removed from how you actually make money. So the way I look at it is I look at markets, I canvass them when I'm first qualifying a market, right? And I'm canvassing the markets and I'm just looking to see markets where I can regularly stabilize above the market cap rate. Because that is a market you can make money in just mathematically. That's how you make money. It's not possible to make money if your market cap rate is above your stabilized yield. Just not, right? So that's how I look at it. And obviously I look at the statistics later and I'll kind of filter through that. But I think everyone else really misses out because they go into it from a statistics perspective first, when that's not how you make money. It's just not. It certainly plays a role, but it doesn't directly lead to you making money. You could have the best market in the world with population growth, everything like that, and still lose money immediately.
When you're making a purchase, are you looking for stuff that you can do a value add on?
I mean, the funny thing is, like, ideally not, right? Ideally, you're just buying at so much price, you don't have to do anything. That's not always possible. But what I will say is usually what I'm looking for is there's a few different types of adding value, right? In one sense, it's actually executing renovations, right? And bringing it up to the renovated market rent. To me, that's actually the worst way of doing it, right? What I like to see is, and I think of market rents in two capacities, right? You have the unrenovated market rent and the renovated market rent. And the unrenovated market rent is still a thing. Right? And I think a lot of people skip over that because all they do is look at the renovated numbers and see what you can get on the top end. But if your property is currently renting for $800, the unrenovated market rent's $1,000, and the renovated is $1,200 or whatever, you can put in $0 and get up there. So what I'm usually looking for is I want markets where I can actually not renovate, and that we're below the unrenovated market rent. That requires zero work. All you're doing is changing a number on a lease, and you're 100% going to get there because you're still the lowest number in the market, right? You're still kind of the lowest end rent. So I guess to answer your question, yeah, we do look to add value, but in general, we're trying to do as little as possible. And for example, that deal we just sold, it was like 6 months ago, we only renovated 8 units and it was a 5X because the unrenovated market rent was so much higher than where the rents were that we just didn't have to do much from a renovation perspective.
So it's a matter of buying right.
So like, this is the thing in real estate too, is that everyone always talks about operations. It doesn't matter. Like if you look at a stabilized yield formula, 90% of it is your purchase price. So you can try and like flail around and like figure out that last 10% as much as you want. It's not going to matter, right? If you buy wrong, it's over. Like there's no point in like trying to be like the operational genius. There's no point in being like, oh, like this is what we do. We're the property managers. We do this and that. It's like the deal's done. Like you just cut your losses and move on at that point. So it's all about the acquisition. And by the same token, right, if you buy right, you could literally have a monkey operate the property. It just doesn't matter. And if you buy right and you're going to stabilize high, it does not matter. It is nearly impossible to mess up. I'm sure someone can do it. So I won't say like it's guaranteed, but it's nearly impossible.
So what's generally your exit strategy? You mentioned evergreen portfolio, but I don't think that's what you're doing. You're generally selling these in what kind of time frame?
I'm generally targeting like a 3-year time frame, but if I can do it quicker, I do it quicker. Honestly, if ideally I'm selling everything just after a year, just so I don't have to pay short-term capital gains. But I'm trying to get in and out as much as possible. I know a lot of people don't like doing that. They're big on the tax advantages. To me, every single time in my life I've made a decision based on taxes, I've ended up losing way more money on the back end. So I'm very fine with paying the taxes. Not that obviously I'd like to not do it, but it's just what I've learned over time. And that kind of allows you to be very quick in and out with these things, which is the other thing too. A lot of people don't realize is they have this idea they're going to hold forever. And it's like, you have a lot of expenses that come up when you're running a business, right? You have, especially when you're running a real estate private equity business, right? So like, just to give an example, right? Say you're buying $5 million deals and you're doing 3 of them a year, right? And you're putting in, let's say the equity is, just to make the numbers clean, you're putting in 1.5 mil of equity into those deals. You're 10 to 20% of the equity. Usually I'm 30 to 40% of the equity with my business partner. But let's say you're 20% of the equity, right? That's $300K you're putting into every deal, right? You buy 3 deals a year. That's $900,000. It takes 2 more years to actually get the money out of that first deal. So by the time you're done, you're into it for 2.7 mil just on what you're investing into the deals. Not to mention you're paying taxes, your life expenses, pay, just everything, right? So I think a lot of people have this idea, we'll just hold forever. It's like, we need money in the door, actually, in the beginning. You need a lot of money in the door. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really difficult. And you'll be like living on ramen, which like I don't really like doing. So I'd rather pay the taxes up front, have a lot of fun, spend the money, and whatever, you make it up on the back end.
There's a lot of directions I could go right now. You had mentioned triangle investing. When you do liquidate and you exit a deal, do you consider a triangle investing approach for yourself? Or are you only focused on plowing it back into more real estate? Or do you have other aspects that you're investing in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I look at a lot of stuff now. I think in general, basically if you're really good at what you do, right? And on the real estate side, you don't even actually need to be that good at what you do, just because you're our general partner. And if you think about the fees you get on a standard deal, if you're any bit good, you're making a 3 to 5x on your money, right? Any bit good. And just to run you through the math on that, just because I know some people will be like, oh, you're lying. Like, it's honestly simple math. Say you buy a deal for $1 million, right? 750K debt, 250K equity. You're putting in 10% of the equity as the sponsor, right? So you're putting in 25 grand. You charge a 1% acquisition fee, which is honestly probably low for that. You could probably do 2%, but we'll say it's 1%, right? That's off the bat, right? That's 10 grand in your pocket, right? So you already made, what is that? A percent of your money back, right? Then you have asset management fees of 2% of the equity, right? For 5 years, let's call it, just call it a 5-year hold, right? So 250K, that's what, 5 grand a year. So that's another 25K. So at this point, you've already taken 35K back out. You get your other 25K back out, right? Because that's your principal. You're already over 2x your money, not even counting profit in the deal, right? You get any sort of profit in the deal, it's a 3x easily. And that goes as you scale up in volume too. Obviously, the math is the same. So when people ask me, they're like, hey, like, you putting your money in the market? It's like, why would I do that? I can't outperform a 3x in the market. Like, it's insane. You'd have to be like an insane person to actually put your money in the market instead of just making a 3x on a very mediocre real estate deal just with your fees. So what starts to happen is your opportunity cost becomes so high that it's really hard to put money anywhere else aside from another business. So like, I look at a lot of other businesses, and I'm looking at actually starting and buying a few right now, but that's the only thing that could possibly hit the same return hurdle. And even then, you really have to think about it, because the risk you're taking on a multifamily deal that you know really well is really low. So you basically have I'm not going to call it a risk-free, but a very low risk 3 to 5x. And if you outperform, it's way higher than that, versus going into a field you don't know well, stuff you may not be able to control. It's like, well, why would I do it?
Yeah. So you're looking at a couple businesses right now. Are they service-based businesses? What are they mismanaged? Like, what are you looking for? What's your kind of buy box you're interested in?
A lot of service-based stuff. Really, actually, there's one thing I will go into on that. I think what I actually didn't know in the beginning when I started running businesses is just how much of it is based on revenue, right? Obviously, you think there's a lot of it is based on how you run it, your fulfillment, your operations, everything like that. And meanwhile, like, if you have a good sales team, you're going to be the richest guy in the world. It doesn't matter what you're selling, right? If you know how to create a sales team, you could be selling TVs, you could be selling jacuzzis, you could be selling real estate private equity deals. It does not matter. So that's the entire thing. And that's how people get really, really rich, is they create great sales teams. That's how people do it in business. And I think that's one of the things that really just started hitting home to me in the last few years. So it's really about, I would say my focus now is all on the side of generating that revenue and figuring out whether it's one, you're bringing the leads in the door yourself, or two, you're buying leads and you're able to convert them in a way that makes sense at scale. And those are really the two things. And once you crack that, say you crack being able to buy leads for your business, right? And that could be call center leads, it could be email leads, it could be whatever, right? It doesn't matter. Once you're able to crack that and you just know basically your return on cost of every single new customer, it's done, right? Like, you could be selling anything. And I think that's one of the hardest things to crack. I'm not going to say it's an easy process. But once you do, that's how people become really, really rich, right? That's it. You need to find a business where you can either generate a lot of leads or you can buy a lot of leads, and you just scale it. So that's what I've been looking at most recently.
Your background really was as an analyst, but you've obviously got really strong sales skills as well. Where did you develop those?
I have no idea. That I think I learned over time. I think a lot of that too is I did do a lot of pitches as an analyst. And I think you realize how you mess up so many times with that. And even like when I was pitching people my first real estate deals, my first pitches were horrible. And I'll even get that now. Like when I'm pitching someone on a new deal, I'll think about it afterward and I'm just like, what am I doing? Or like, why do they pitch it like this? And it usually takes a few iterations to be like, okay, like, here we go. This is actually the right way to do it. But I do think that loop becomes quicker and quicker every time. And once you kind of understand the process, what you're selling, your demeanor, because a lot of it is just the confidence level. And then a lot of it too is once you get to a certain point, especially this happens on the real estate side a lot now, we've done so well for people on deals that you don't really need to sell much. If anything, a lot of the time you're just talking about the risks so people don't like hate you later on if it goes bad. Because they think every deal is going to be like a 5X again. You're like, well, like, pump the brakes, right? And obviously you think you're going to do well, but you want to set expectations. So I think a lot of it kind of turns over to that. What I think has been humbling is I've actually taken, and on the online side, my coaching business and all of that, I've tried doing a lot of the sales calls. And I think it's humbling when you realize like you're not as good as the salespeople with that. And it's one of the only things that you can directly track the metrics of. And I remember I was just looking after 1 month, I was like, all right, like let me check my metrics. It was just horrible, like just total crap metrics. And I was like, all right, like literally no one to blame but myself, you know? And in a really good way too, it allows you to delegate then, because you're like, look, it's not even like I'm better than them. Like I'm going to give it to someone who's better than me. That's fine. I'm just going to let them do it. I think stuff like that was pretty cool too, because I've always been like, oh, like, yeah, I could do it. Like I'm going to be really good at it. And like, I'm good at it. I'm just not as good as the people who are great at it. You know, so you might as well just have the people who are great at it do it.
Yeah. Let's get into that further. Your whole Twitter persona, real estate god, and creating content and writing. I've been, like I said, a really big fan of your stuff. There's several that I like. There's creating your own yacht, which I kind of want to talk about. There's engineering luck and creating your environment. But I want to first touch on Twitter. Like, when did you realize what the power of Twitter and what it could do for your career?
That was a while ago. I mean, I think I got on 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know the exact date. But I think that honestly might have been from following Wall Street Playboy's Twitter account and then going on from there. I don't know if I would credit them with the whole, like everything else, because I think I did a lot of the rest of that organically, but I think they were kind of the first reasons why I went on there. Because I've never been a social media guy. I have zero personal social media. Like I just think the whole thing is so embarrassing. But I think once you learn what you're doing and you understand distribution, and this is kind of what I was talking about before with sales cycle, right? And understanding how to get leads, it's one of the most effective ways in the world to get leads. Right. And if you look at the people who really crack it, and this guy Andrew Tate, I don't know if you know him, he obviously gets a ton of hate. He is easily one of the best business people we've seen in the last 10 years. Right. That what he's done on the organic side of marketing is just, I think it's unparalleled. And regardless of what he's selling, he could be selling whatever. But the way he's been able to do it, I think is insane. And when you look at people like that, they've been able to scale their leads to such an extent that the business is like, the moat is insane. The moat's insane. Everything's insane. It becomes such a crazy good business. So I think that's one of the things you learn pretty quickly too. It's like when you have this distribution channel, you can use it for whatever you want. And whether that's, for example, like I'll be like, hey, look, I'm looking for deals. Send it over. Right. Or, hey, I'm trying to get clients for my coaching business or whatever it is. Or even half the time I'm just like, hey, look, I have a bad insurance quote. Can someone help me out? Just basic stuff. Right. Or I don't know this market well. Can someone help? Or I'm going here. Like, does anyone know someone who knows that? Just the network you get and the distribution you get, it allows you to do so many things. And I think that's what really brought me to the space when I realized that.
Let's get into some of the articles that you've posted on Twitter. Talk to me about creating your own yacht. You mentioned Aristotle Onassis. Can you talk about that story a little?
Yeah, that happened to me. I was reading his autobiography, or maybe not autobiography, but his biography. And just the whole concept of how he ran business was so insane to me when you compare it to how people run it now. And basically everything he did was just bringing people to him, right? He basically ran the business from the yacht. Just the idea of that every time you like stepped onto the yacht, you're basically like completely ceding like any sort of like position you have over to him, right? You're just like, you're totally in his territory. Everything's on his terms. And I think the way he was able to do that was so brilliant. I think it worked so well too, because he was in the shipping business, right? So it paired really well with that. But basically that entire concept is like, look, you're bringing people to you. And once you do that, a lot of things start happening simultaneously, but you don't have those kind of boring interactions or low level interactions that most people have, where it's like, hey, who are you? Whatever, where'd you go to school? What do you do now? What do you do? That doesn't happen, right? Because everyone knows who you are. Everyone's already impressed by you and everyone wants to meet you. And it doesn't mean you have to do it in a gaudy way. I think he was definitely a bit of a showman. I think there are a ton of different ways, and I know I talk about that in the article, how you can do it in a more like effective way that's value add for everyone. But basically the concept is like, look, instead of meeting them as a Joe Schmo, you meet them as someone, right? And you meet them on your own terms because they're coming to you. And you basically engineer situations where that's the case.
I think you may have mentioned this. The example you gave, Moses Kagan comes to mind in creating Reconvene. It's a perfect example of he's the guy, and people are coming not only for him, but largely, he's the guy that's in charge of the thing, and it's a great benefit.
Exactly, right? You just kind of, and it doesn't even need to be that extreme, right? Maybe you're just, in like an extremely low level example, maybe you're just holding a Super Bowl party every year, right? But just as long as it's on your own terms, people want to meet you, engineer the event in a way that is tasteful, you end up meeting a lot of people and generating a network that you wouldn't normally have generated. And I think you obviously could do it in a way better way than a Super Bowl party. I think that's a low level way, but even something like a social media account, just the amount of inbound you get from running something that has a follower base is really pretty insane. And the way I look at it is you want to engineer as many situations as possible where it's on your own terms. And I think almost no one does that in life.
I had Zieva Kaczynski on the show a couple weeks ago, and he met Sam Parr, had a book club when he was like, nobody knew who Sam Parr was of The Hustle. And he just started a book club, and Zieva Kaczynski showed up at his book club, met him. Tim Ferriss shows up later on down the road. You know, it's just like, and Sam was the guy leading the book club. Anybody can do that, but not everybody takes the time to organize it and do it. And the benefits are huge. And it, like you said, it could be anything, could be a simple Super Bowl party.
It really could be anything. The whole thing is you're bringing people together who wouldn't have been there, and you're bringing them together on your own terms. And that's really the crux of it. Obviously, there's higher levels to it. Like I said, Reconvene is probably on the higher end. I think a social media account's probably on the higher end, just because the scale you can reach is actually infinite, essentially. But yeah, anything you could do, any situation you can engineer like that, it helps.
Let's get into a little bit about the Real Estate God University Acquisitions Bootcamp. Talk to me a little bit about that and what you've been up to lately with it.
Yeah, so Acquisitions Bootcamp is basically, to take a step back at how I created the program, is I think the way a lot of investing is taught right now is completely wrong, right? Basically, you get handed a book of like what Warren Buffett did like 50 years ago, and you say, here's how to invest, which I don't think makes sense for a lot of reasons, but mainly because every person's different, right? Every person's looking for, they have a different risk profile, they have a different skill set, they have different goals, right? So all those things mean that like what I would tell someone to do who's 65 is not the same thing I'd tell someone to do who's 25, right? By the same token, someone who has a 10 risk tolerance, I wouldn't tell them to do the same thing as someone who has a 5 risk tolerance. But in conventional sense, they're all taught the same way, right? Like when you go to an MBA class, no one's taught differently based on the risk profile, which to me makes no sense. But that's kind of how I created the program. And basically what the program is, it's 8 weeks. You're working one-on-one with either me or my business partner. We don't like farm it out to anyone at all. And the first week is all about understanding who you are and creating a business strategy that will work for you specifically in real estate, right? So week 1 is we understand all those parameters, right? Your risk profile, your skill set, your goals, everything like that. And we basically create a personalized strategy for you that makes sense for you to best make money in real estate moving forward. And I think no one's ever really done something like that before. To some degree, I think because it's hard, but in reality, once you kind of get the process down, I don't think it's that hard. And I think it also ends up helping a ton because you end up, I mean, I've dealt with so many beginners at this point and people, even non-beginners who are trying to switch over from certain other asset classes or switch from single family to multifamily, whatever it is. And the biggest mistake they make is they spend like 2 years not knowing what to do because they don't have a plan. So I always think the first thing you do is you create a plan. Second thing is on the underwriting side. So that's week 2. Week 2 is all about underwriting. It's about underwriting the right way. I think a lot of people focus on like 30 different metrics. That's just not what I do, right? Basically, I'm looking at 2 things. One is on your in-place income, we're looking at the DSCR just to make sure you can source bank debt. On the stabilized income, we're looking at basically your stabilized yield above the market cap rate. You really have to simplify it. Obviously, we get into depth with full models and everything like that once we get into the program and everything. But that's one of the biggest things I've seen. And based on how many clients I've dealt with so far, I would say less than 5% of people, even people who have real estate experience, have underwritten correctly. Everyone always has some big mistake in there, which is goes to show, I guess, the complexity of which is taught right now for just no reason. Week 3 is really all about picking a market, right? So understanding how to pick a market the way I explained earlier in the call, where we're not just like running around like looking at statistics for no reason. We're trying to find places where you can actually make money where the stabilized yield is above the market cap rate and that day 1 you're walking into it making money. Week 4 is just understanding the closing process. And basically what that is due diligence checklist, lender checklist, closing timeline, everything like that to really make you and really get you to the point where you can do it yourself, because that's the point of the entire thing. And then weeks 5 through 8 are all just out in the market, underwriting deals and trying to find a deal. And that's the goal of the program is to get you a deal. So that's really how it works. Mechanically, there's content released every week for the first 4 weeks. And you basically complete the assignments. It doesn't take long. It's around probably 15 minutes a day. And then weeks 5 through 8 is really all on the sourcing side, underwriting deals, and we're trying to get a deal under contract. That's the program. It's done great so far. I actually really enjoy doing it too. And I'm just excited to keep doing it.
That's awesome. I've had several of my early guests on. I mentioned Casey Miracle. There's several others that had done your early on, it was called what? It was like Real Estate God University, or you had a community, right? And they said the value of it was just immense. That and this is not to blow smoke or anything like that, but truly they said it's better than anything else out there, better than a university degree that takes 4 years in real estate, whatever. This is compressed time. It's so useful and actionable and all of that. So pretty cool, like what you've created.
Appreciate that. It's pretty funny you say that. I was actually, one of my friends is in business school right now, and they had a case. It was actually a Harvard MBA case study that they were just doing. And he was like, hey, do you mind helping me out with this? And it was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in my life. So like, I don't know what they're doing in college right now, but it seems like it's just so useless. And I know from the people I've talked to who have gotten their masters in real estate and stuff like that, all of them have said like it doesn't teach them anything. Like they were just like, it was like a waste of time aside from the networking. So I do think it's pretty cool to be able to deliver what I think is a superior product for a significantly lower price across the board.
Right. And do it in 8 weeks or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. You try and compress the entire timeline from 2 years to 8 weeks.
And the community is huge. I imagine like everybody's kind of talking, sharing what they're up to. And, so many people talk about the importance of having a mastermind and community, like the growth, the exponential growth that takes place when you put yourself in those situations is massive compared to just you on your own trying to do it alone.
100%. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things too, is once you actually want to start making money, it's being around people who that's what they do, is they make money, right? Because most people don't make money, right? That's not what they do. They don't spend time thinking about it. They don't spend time doing it. But if you're around people, that's all they do. And what I've always said too is like, look, if you lock yourself in a room for 16 hours a day for 365 days a year, you're going to make a lot of money, right? The hard part isn't actually making the money. The hard part is getting the ability to lock yourself in a room for that long. So I think people really complicate what's difficult and what isn't there. But if you spend all your time making money, you're going to make money. You just will. And I think that's kind of the same concept, is once you start dealing with the people who make money, they kind of have that same mentality. It really helps.
Yeah. You've got so much going on. You've got, the Acquisitions Bootcamp. You're working one-on-one with people. You've got your own deals going on. Like, talk to me about just the habits in your daily schedule. How do you prevent work from like bleeding over? Because you could work 24 hours a day, right? I'm in the same situation. And I'm struggling with this actually. Like, how do you structure your time and your life so you're not working all the time?
I don't think I'm the guy to talk to for this. I think
okay.
I think I'm pretty much out of my mind with this stuff. But I'm pretty much always working. I don't know if I've taken that many days off. I'm very bad, I would say, at the whole work-life balance thing. And usually what makes me, I think, uniquely bad at it is I'm very prone to like sprints. So like I'll regularly go through a period where I'm literally doing nothing but working. And then I'll go through another period where I just don't touch anything for a while and just am doing whatever. And then you just have to like switch back and forth too, which I think drives my business partner somewhat insane sometimes. But I don't think I'm the guy to ask for this. I don't have like a schedule. I'm not really good at that stuff. I'm very much like a ride the wave type of guy, which I think helps me a lot in a lot of ways. I think it's really useful when you're in a deal business where it is sprints, right? Basically, when you're closing a deal, it is all about sprinting. But I think in a lot of ways, it probably hurts me on the operational side of a lot of things. Just setting up systems and stuff like that, I think is definitely not my strong suit, which I'm trying to be better at. And I think that's one of the things as you try and scale, operations are really important, right? Just being able to set up those systems, like I was saying, and really on the sales side, it's like, how can we get leads in the door? How can we convert those leads? And that's every single business. It's really all you're doing, all you need to figure out. And then you have the fulfillment side, but fulfillment's almost never the hardest part of the business. And I think a lot of people are always like, oh, like when you buy the deal, like the work starts. Like, no, it doesn't. Like the work is done if you bought a great deal. Like that is done at acquisition. That was the hardest part of the deal, was buying something for $2 million that was worth $5 million. That's by far the hardest part. After that, like I'm happy to work on like hammering nails, but that's not difficult. Like that's going to get done. So that's kind of how I look at it. And I think it's definitely a bit of a change in mindset when you kind of move over to that operational side, specifically of really bringing in revenue more than anything else.
So what's the end game? Do you have like a X number? Like once you hit X, I'm out, I'm done, I'm going to go surf or whatever? Or do you like the game? Do you see yourself continuing to, contribute to this community you've got going and doing deals and buying businesses? Like,
I don't think I'll ever stop. I think what I do will probably change a bit over time. I don't think I'll ever stop buying real estate. I think I think I'm very good at it. And two, I think it's almost impossible to replace just everything I've said before with the returns I get, the risk reward, the tax benefits, all of that. But I think in general, I'll probably end up switching through a lot of things as time goes on, just because I kind of get bored, just whatever I'm doing. And I think I'll probably like what's appealing to me is just being able to, especially these deals that I sell out of pretty quickly, is like you can choose to like change direction at that point. Whereas like if you build a really large organization, you can't really change direction. Like you're on the Titanic, right? It's going to take forever to turn that. And I think a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of people who run private equity firms of a kind of medium scale, and a lot of them feel trapped because you can't really get off the ship. You can't really turn the ship. And you're just like kind of stuck making money that you really wish was a little more, but you can't do much about. So I'd like to avoid that. But yeah, basically how I look at it is that there's a few other things I'd like to do. I'd like to run some physical businesses. I think I'd be good at that. I also the only thing I'd actually want to be an employee for is I would consider copywriting. I think I'd be really, really good at long form copywriting. And I'd like to do that for one of the big affiliates one day, just in like a pure project role where they're like, hey, look, like you have 2 weeks, like create a script, like we'll handle, like, I don't want to deal with any of the media buying or anything like that. I'll have them do it. Just be like, look, like just create it and we'll run it. And I think that'd be really cool to do too.
That would be cool. Have you studied a lot of copywriting?
No, but I think the way I write is essentially copywriting.
It is, yeah.
And when I've written copy for a lot of my own products, I've actually found that I was better at it than the copywriters I hired. So it's something I enjoy doing. I think also if I spend some time actually studying it, like if you just give me 2 weeks and like every sales letter, I think I could do a really good job of creating like a killer sales letter for a product. So it's something, I'm not going to say I'm going to do it right now, but I would like to just spend a month doing that probably at some point.
I have the same kind of thought process. I'm listening to David Senra's Founders Podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It's really good. He just reads biographies and then does basically his key takeaways. And I listened to the one on David Ogilvy, the Ogilvy and Mather guy, and Confessions of an Ad Man. Really, really good and inspiring. And his writing was so good. And I don't know, I love to write and read, and the two go hand in hand for me, but we'll see. That's really cool. Is there anything we didn't get a chance to talk about that you wanted to touch on?
I think honestly, like affiliate marketing side, I think I would really like. I think it gets a little touchy with just how you're kind of always in a gray area. From what I understand, I have a lot of friends in the affiliate space, but I think that would be really fun. I think copywriting would be really fun. I also think doing like a true type service business would be really fun, which I'm looking at doing that right now as well. So just kind of across the board. But in general, like if you gave me the choice, I would stay in real estate over all those. I just think real estate is just so, like I said, it just, once you get it and you understand it, it's just so simple. And you're really not taking that much risk. Your return you're getting is really unparalleled. And the tax advantages are unparalleled. So it's like, it's almost impossible to give up that income stream just because it is so good. And even like I said, like I'm not overly passionate about any of these things. Like I could go between all of them, but I just think the risk reward there and the money you make is just kind of unparalleled.
Right. And what's the alternative? Like you said, it's not going to be in the stock market. You're not.
Every time someone gives me an alternative, I run the numbers and I'm like, this makes no sense. Like, I don't know why we're even discussing this. And I'll get someone to be like, hey, like, have you thought about like pumping some of this money into like X, Y, and Z stock? I was like, why? Like, so I can have a management team. I don't even know what they're doing. Like, I can't control any of it. And like, are they going to 3X my money? Like, almost certainly not. And even if they do, is the risk reward worth that versus me controlling it and 3Xing it? Like, it's not even close.
Are you a Bitcoin guy at all?
I used to own a fair amount of Bitcoin and Ethereum, mostly Ethereum. Had some run-ins with that we could probably get into, but I lost a fair amount and made a fair amount in there to keep it simple. Currently, so I've sworn that off for a bit just because basically what I realized is look, you can make a lot of money in those spaces, and I think those spaces will continue to grow. But when I control my own money, I tend to do extremely well. When I put it kind of in the hands of whatever you want to call Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's a lot more factors at play. So to me, it's just like, look, I could probably make some fast money in that, or I could just keep doing what I'm doing. And like, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to make a lot of money, right? There's no doubt about it just based on the numbers. So why take the risk, right? Why go into that space when you have a sure thing?
My dad had the same advice. He's a real estate guy. And he's like, you make money in your own business that you know well, and you lose it when you go outside of your circle of competence and try to make it somewhere else. And I kind of joke, he's invested in the stock market and he'll get emotional and sell at exactly the wrong time. I'm like, just do exactly the opposite of what my dad does and you're going to do pretty well. But he's done well in real estate, but nowhere else.
And the thing with real estate too is like, obviously it's harder to panic sell because it's harder to transact in, but it's also harder to panic sell because the value is like so easy to calculate for yourself. Like when you have, let's just say, all right, cap rates cap rates go up 100 basis points, but you still have the same 500K coming to you every month, like, or every year, whatever you want to call it. Like, what do you care? Right? You're just going to keep taking the money. It's not like a stock where, like, yeah, obviously it's operating off fundamentals and there's cash flow there, but it's not as tangible to you, right? Especially if it's a non-dividend paying stock. It's not as tangible. Like, you don't really know how the value is being computed as much. You don't see the cash flow coming in. It's not as much of like a real thing. And I think that's where people get tripped up. But like, whenever I have a good real estate asset and the market turns, I never care. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, the money's still there. What do I care?
This is a good place to stop. Real Estate God, thanks so much for your time. How can people find out more about you, get in touch with you, learn about your acquisition bootcamp, stuff like that?
Yeah, so all on Twitter, it's at the Real Estate G6, or if you just search the Real Estate God, and then everything's in my bio there. So you can just search from there.
Yeah, I highly recommend your stuff. Great content that you're putting out, and really a great service to people just getting started and people that have had a lot of experience as well.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I had a great time on the call.
And so I knew that I liked my job, but the idea that, oh my God, I can't stop doing this. And so if I set my life up in such a way that I have to make this much money to live, then I have to do that. And that was really terrifying to me, even in, mid to late 20s. And so I started laying that foundation long before I wanted to leave.